100,000 years ago, there were at least 6 different human species walking on this planet. 6. We were not alone, and we were certainly not special. We were just another animal minding our own business in a quiet, forgotten corner of Africa. We had no grand purpose, no divine destiny to rule the globe. We were completely insignificant. Think of our ancestors like a jellyfish, or a woodpecker, or a wild baboon, just a biological blip in the terrifying scheme of nature. For millions of years, humans were squarely planted in the exact middle of the food chain. We hunted small, defenseless creatures, we gathered wild nuts, and we lived in a constant, paralyzing state of terror. We were deeply terrified of the larger predators. This is a crucial piece of our psychological DNA, a ghost that still haunts our minds today. Go back to the ancient savannah. When a lion makes a kill, it eats the absolute best parts, the prime, bloody cuts of meat. Then, the hyenas and the jackals come in and they aggressively take the scraps. And only then, only after the deadly beasts have left the area, would our ancestors sneak out of the bushes. What was left for us? Bones. That was our specialty, our sad little niche in the ecosystem. We didn't invent stone tools to build glorious cities or to carve statues of gods. We invented tools to violently crack open abandoned bones, just to scrape out the tiny bit of marrow hidden inside. That was our entire strategy for survival. Why does this brutal history matter to you, sitting right here, right now? Because your brain, your nervous system, is still entirely wired for the middle of the food chain. We are, at our core, a terrified species. We are anxious, we are stressed, we are constantly anticipating complete disaster. Have you ever snapped at a coworker for a minor mistake? Or felt your heart race during a completely safe presentation? That is not you failing. That is the ghost of the terrified scavenger, still living inside your chest, desperately scanning the room for leopards. Have you ever wondered why we gorge on high-calorie, sugary food, even when we know it is destroying our health? If a Stone Age woman found a rare, sweet fig tree in the forest, the most logical thing to do was to eat as many figs as humanly possible. She had to eat fast before the local baboon troop found out and violently chased her away. Our DNA still firmly believes that we are hiding in the savannah, starving. Our current position at the very top of the food chain happened so fast that the global ecosystem simply didn't have time to adjust, and neither did our fragile minds. Most top predators, the truly dangerous ones like great white sharks or lions, evolved their absolute dominance over millions of years. Nature slowly kept them in check. They are confident, secure, majestic in their power. But Homo sapiens? We are like a frightened, insecure dictator of a small banana republic who suddenly got his trembling hands on the nuclear codes. We are paranoid, deeply stressed, and because of that deep ancestral fear, we are tragically destructive to everything around us. But something shifted. Something completely rewrote the rules of the biological game. Around 70,000 years ago, a tiny genetic mutation, a random miswiring in our brains, changed absolutely everything. Historians call it the cognitive revolution. Suddenly, we didn't just communicate about the physical, tangible world right in front of us. Monkeys and apes can warn each other, they can screech and say, "Careful, there is a lion hiding by the river." But Homo sapiens? We developed the unprecedented ability to talk about things that do not even exist. We learned how to gossip. Now, gossip gets a toxic reputation in our modern world. But gossip, as trivial as it sounds, is the very foundation of our survival and our global dominance. It allowed our ancestors to form much larger, more stable bands, to know exactly who is trustworthy, who is a cheat, who hates whom, and who is secretly sleeping with whom behind the bushes. It was a massive revolution in data processing. It allowed our fragile human groups to grow from 30 individuals up to 150. But there is a strict biological limit to this. You can only gossip about so many people before the social web collapses under its own weight. The true superpower, the mind-bending magic trick that actually allowed us to conquer the entire world, was fiction. Myths. Myths. You cannot, under any circumstances, convince a chimpanzee to give you a fresh banana today by promising him that after he dies, he will go to a glorious chimpanzee heaven and receive limitless bananas for eternity. It is completely biologically impossible. Only Homo sapiens can invent and deeply believe a story like that. Think about a modern corporation like Apple or Google. What are they exactly? They are not the buildings. If every single Google office burned down tomorrow, the company would still exist. They are not the employees. People quit every day. A corporation is a collective hallucination. It is a legal fiction written on a piece of paper, backed by the shared belief of lawyers and courts. And yet, this invisible phantom moves billions of dollars and shapes our daily reality. This unique ability to create shared fictions, to invent elaborate religions, to draw imaginary borders for nations, to create the very concept of money, to draft declarations of human rights, this is the invisible glue that binds millions of strangers together. When two strangers who have never met both deeply believe in the exact same invisible God, or the exact same paper currency, or the exact same colored piece of cloth we call a national flag, they can suddenly cooperate. They can organize on a massive scale. They can build towering pyramids, they can launch complex rockets into the freezing void of space, and they can systematically destroy entire natural ecosystems. And this immense, terrifying power of shared belief brings us to a very chilling realization about our past. We didn't just peacefully conquer the world, we efficiently erased all of our competition. Remember those other human species I mentioned at the beginning? The Neanderthals? They were physically stronger than us, better adapted to the freezing cold, and they even had slightly bigger, more developed brains. They survived the unforgiving ice age. But they could not cooperate in massive, flexible numbers, simply because they completely lacked our strange ability to believe in collective myths. When Homo sapiens finally arrived in their snowy territory, it was not a fair fight. It was a small, disorganized local militia going up against a highly coordinated, fanatical empire. We either methodically outcompeted them for scarce food, or we simply violently wiped them out until they were nothing but a fading memory, a few broken bones buried deep in the dirt, waiting for us to dig them up thousands of years later and finally realize that the dark secret to our survival was completely, fundamentally based on our ability to lie, to dream, and to convince millions of others to completely surrender to the illusion of control. For tens of thousands of years, this strange fictional web kept us alive as confident, wandering foragers. We roamed the earth, healthy, athletic, and entirely free. Our diet was an incredibly diverse, daily buffet of nature. If a terrible disease wiped out the wild pigs in the valley, we didn't starve. We simply ate more walnuts, picked more berries, or moved down to the river to catch fish. We worked maybe 15 to 20 hours a week. Think about that for a second. A prehistoric hunter-gatherer had more free time, more genuine, unburdened leisure than any modern corporate executive today. They spent their long afternoons playing with their children, telling intricate stories around the fire, and taking long naps. But then, roughly 10,000 years ago, we made a catastrophic, irreversible mistake. We fell headfirst into a beautifully disguised trap. Historians politely call it the agricultural revolution. We are systematically taught in school that farming was a glorious leap forward. We are told it was a heroic victory of human intelligence over wild, chaotic nature. That is the biggest, most devastating lie in the history of our species. We did not domesticate wheat. Wheat completely, ruthlessly domesticated us. Look at it from the perspective of the wheat plant. 10,000 years ago, it was just a fragile, ordinary wild grass, restricted to a tiny, rocky corner of the Middle East. Suddenly, within just a few millennia, it is growing all over the entire planet, covering millions of square miles. How exactly did a simple grass conquer the world? By deeply manipulating the most intelligent animal on Earth. Homo sapiens surrendered their freedom, their health, and their very bodies just to serve the relentless needs of this plant. Our ancient ancestors evolved over millions of years to climb trees, sprint after gazelles, and walk long, wandering distances. We absolutely did not evolve to carry heavy buckets of water, clear massive fields of rocks, or spend 10 agonizing hours a day bending over in the blistering sun. Our spines, our knees, our joints, they screamed in constant agony. We traded a rich, varied diet for a miserable, monotonous bowl of daily porridge. Our immune systems crashed, and devastating new diseases tore through our crowded, filthy villages. And what exactly did we get in return for breaking our backs? The fragile illusion of security. We foolishly thought if we plant enough seeds, if we work just a little bit harder this year, we will build a surplus. We thought we would never starve again. But nature is a cruel, entirely unpredictable gambler. When the rains failed, or when a massive dark cloud of locusts arrived, millions of hard-working farmers starved to death. The hunter-gatherers could just walk away from a drought. The farmer was chained to his dying field. So why did we do it? Why didn't we just wake up one morning, pack our things, and go back to the forest? Because the trap closed slowly, invisibly, over generations. It was a slow poison. By the time we finally realized we were working much harder for a significantly worse life, our population had completely exploded. A farming village can support vastly more people than a wandering tribe. But those people are weaker, sicker, and deeply anxious. We could no longer feed everyone by simply hunting and gathering. We had burned the bridge behind us. We were stuck. This is the exact same psychological trap that completely captures us right now today. Look closely at the modern, ambitious young professional. They graduate from university, full of life, and take a high-stress, fiercely demanding corporate job. They swear to their friends that they will work brutal hours just for a few years, just to save some money, get a secure foundation, and build a comfortable life. But then they buy a massive, echoing house. They get a heavy, terrifying mortgage. They buy an expensive luxury car to commute to the job they hate. Can they just quit? Can they just walk away and go back to a simple, carefree life? No. The luxury silently became a strict necessity. The financial security became a psychological prison. Just like the ancient, exhausted farmer, tied forever to his tiny patch of dirt, we are completely tied to our emails, our crushing debts, and our endless pursuit of more. We are always sacrificing the present moment, destroying our current happiness for a promised future that never actually arrives. Farming gave us a massive, unprecedented surplus of food for the very first time in history. But surplus is inherently dangerous. When you have extra food, you have to store it and you have to fiercely protect it. And wherever there is a massive, tempting pile of wealth, someone violent, ruthless, and ambitious will step forward and claim it. This is exactly where kings, emperors, and corrupt politicians were born. The brutal, uncomfortable reality of human history is that the agricultural surplus did not go to the desperate people who actually bled and sweated in the fields. It went to a tiny, elite, parasitic fraction of society. It fed the heavily armed soldiers, the wealthy priests, the artists, and the elite philosophers. History, as we read it in our thick, heavy textbooks, is largely the story of what a very small handful of people did, while the other 99% were outside, endlessly, hopelessly plowing fields. To manage all this stolen wealth, to ruthlessly keep track of exactly who paid their taxes and who didn't, the human brain was simply not enough. Our brains were built to remember plants, animals, and local gossip. They were not built to remember thousands of complex tax records. We had to invent a completely new, artificial way to store data outside of our own fragile skulls. We had to invent writing, numbers, suffocating bureaucracy. We slowly transformed from living, breathing storytellers into mere numbers on a clay tablet, and eventually just numbers on a glowing digital screen. But our deep, insatiable, biological hunger for connection, for meaning, could never be satisfied by mere numbers or massive piles of stolen grain. So, we created the ultimate unifying fiction, the most powerful, dangerous, and universally accepted story ever told in the entire history of our species, an idea so incredibly contagious that it would tear down empires, cross vast oceans, and force bitter, lifelong enemies to finally trust each other completely. I am talking, of course, about money. We love to passionately, dramatically hate money. We call it the dark root of all evil. We loudly blame it for greed, for endless war, and for the utter, tragic destruction of our human morals. But I want you to look at it from a completely different, purely psychological standpoint. Money is actually the absolute zenith of human tolerance. Think about it. Religion furiously asks us to believe in the exact same God, and if we refuse, we historically slaughter each other. Nations proudly ask us to believe in the exact same flag, and if we refuse, we send our children to die in muddy trenches. But money? Money asks us to believe in absolutely nothing but the pure mathematical fiction of mutual value. It is the single, solitary story in all of human history that absolutely everyone, everywhere, deeply and universally believes. Osama bin Laden passionately, violently hated American culture, American religion, and American politics. But he had absolutely no problem deeply trusting the American dollar. Why? Because money is an incredibly resilient system of mutual global trust. It allowed complete strangers, people who couldn't speak the same language or worship the same deity, to finally, effectively cooperate. It built the sprawling, modern, global web we live in today. But money alone was not enough to push us into this terrifying, godlike future. We needed one more massive, earth-shattering mental shift. For thousands of years, human beings firmly believed that the golden age was completely, permanently in the past. They thought the ancient gods, or the wise old ancestors, already knew absolutely everything there was to know. If a terrible, bloody plague struck your city, you didn't look through a microscope for a tiny, invisible pathogen. You looked inside yourself, desperately searching for a terrible, unforgivable sin you had committed against the angry heavens. Then, about 500 years ago, we did something completely unprecedented, something breathtakingly terrifying. We looked up at the vast, terrifyingly empty sky, we looked at the blank spaces on the maps of the world, and we loudly, collectively admitted, we do not know. This was the birth of the scientific revolution. The absolute superpower of modern science is not its complex, chalk-filled equations or its shiny, multi-billion-dollar laboratories. Its true, world-breaking power is its profound, institutionalized willingness to actively admit total ignorance. The very moment we finally admitted we didn't know everything, we became violently, insatiably hungry to discover. We woke up and realized that crushing poverty, deadly sickness, and even death itself were not divine, inevitable punishments. They were simply complex biological engineering problems. And engineering problems have practical solutions. But science is incredibly, painfully expensive. You cannot build a towering, fire-breathing rocket or meticulously sequence a microscopic human genome without massive, flowing rivers of cash. So, science made a dark, unbreakable, and highly profitable alliance with two very powerful, very ambitious forces, empire and capitalism. The wealthy kings and the ruthless bankers didn't fund science out of pure, innocent, childlike curiosity. They aggressively funded it to build better, deadlier cannons, to fiercely map faster trade routes, and to ruthlessly extract more resources from the earth. The European empires violently conquered the globe, not just with brutal, bloody swords, but with highly advanced navigation, deadly, precise medicine, and superior, deeply organized data. Meanwhile, capitalism convinced us all of a beautiful, highly addictive new fiction. It convinced us that the pie of global wealth is not fixed. If I get richer today, you do not actually have to get poorer. We can simply, endlessly bake a bigger pie through relentless, exhausting, non-stop innovation. But this endless, frantic pursuit of the bigger pie has a terrifying, hidden, catastrophic cost. We are rapidly, blindly ripping the natural earth apart, turning magnificent ancient forests into cheap, disposable paper, and turning vast, deep, silent oceans into toxic, floating plastic graveyards. We are now gods. We have violently split the fundamental atom We have successfully walked on the silent, dusty surface of the moon, and we are currently casually hacking the very genetic code of life itself. We are standing right now on the absolute terrifying edge of becoming something else entirely, something far beyond the fragile limits of Homo sapiens. But let me ask you a very direct, very uncomfortable, very intimate question. Are we actually any happier? Are you happier right now, anxiously doom scrolling on a glowing, addictive piece of glass, than the ancient, wandering hunter-gatherer who spent his long, quiet afternoon laughing by the river? We possess terrifying, godlike power, but we are completely, tragically lacking in any godlike wisdom. We still fiercely operate with the exact same terrified, deeply insecure brains of an ape hiding in the tall grass of the savannah. We are miserable, anxious gods, endlessly seeking the next quick hit of cheap dopamine, the next momentary, flashing distraction from the deep, vast, echoing emptiness inside our modern, lonely, concrete apartments. This is the ultimate, tragic, defining conflict of our entire species. We completely master the external, physical, tangible world, but we are completely, utterly lost inside the dark maze of our own minds. We have immense, earth-shattering power, but we do not actually know what we deeply, truly want. And there is nothing more terrifying, more universally dangerous, than a deeply dissatisfied, incredibly powerful God who does not know what he wants. You need to deeply, fundamentally understand this long, bloody history to finally understand why you feel so incredibly overwhelmed today. It is not your fault. It is the heavy, invisible weight of 70,000 years of brutal survival crashing down on your exhausted shoulders right now. If this dark, honest journey into our past shifted something deep inside your mind today, if it finally helped you see the invisible fictions aggressively ruling your daily life, then simply hit that subscribe button to join our quiet rebellion of thought. Because the real story, the one where we finally figure out who we really are, is just beginning.